Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're throwing on our military historian hats to look at a clash of absolute tactical geniuses, one that literally redrew the map of Europe. We're diving right into the geopolitical powder keg of the 30 Years' War. It's the ultimate showdown, unstoppable aggression versus immovable strategy, and honestly, it's a rivalry that completely redefined the art of war. To keep things structured for this briefing, we'll quickly look at our titans of Central Europe, spot some echoes of ancient commanders, break down the tactical revolution they sparked, wade into the fog of Lützen, and finally, survey the tragic harvest of this whole ordeal. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into part one, the titans of Central Europe. It's the lion taking on the imperial commander. You know, what makes this specific rivalry so incredibly fascinating is the absolute night and day contrast in their leadership styles. On one hand, you've got the Swedish king, Gustavus Adolphus. They called him the Lion of the North for a reason. The guy was aggressively brilliant, always leading right from the front to snatch these sweeping victories. And his ultimate foil? The imperial commander, Albrecht von Wallenstein. Wallenstein didn't fight like a lion. He treated war like a high-stakes, lethal game of chess. He was this deeply calculated genius who actually had to be pulled out of retirement just to hit the brakes on the Swedish momentum. Seriously, the sheer force of Sweden's entry into this war shattered the whole geopolitical landscape. We're talking an overnight paradigm shift, kind of like the early Muslim conquests or the Roman Republic's rapid expansion. It was that massive. By 1632, Gustavus Adolphus had basically steamrolled right across Germany. His victories were so consecutive and so devastating that the Catholic emperor was pushed into a corner. Out of pure desperation, he had to bring his most feared general, Wallenstein, back into the fray just to stop the bleeding. Moving right along to section 2, let's look at the echoes of ancient commanders, because history really does repeat itself. And this brilliantly illustrates how these 17th century rivals totally mirror some heavy hitters from classical antiquity. Gustavus Adolphus? His lightning-quick marches are practically a carbon copy of the Roman Emperor Aurelian, while his raw battlefield aggression just screams Julius Caesar in Gaul. On the flip side, Wallenstein is a dead ringer for Belisarius, a brilliant mind constantly shadowed by intense political paranoia. Oh, and the dense fog of Lützen itself? It perfectly mirrors the brutal disorientation we saw back at the Battle of Cynocephalae. So, about that paranoia. Wallenstein was wildly popular with his troops. I mean, they absolutely loved the guy. But here's the catch. In the 17th century, wielding that much loyalty was actually super dangerous. It sparked this severe political paranoia within his own Catholic emperor. It perfectly mirrors the way the Byzantine emperor Justinian was completely terrified of his top general, Belisarius. Wallenstein's massive success paradoxically painted a giant target on his own back. All right, section 3, the tactical revolution. Let's talk about how pike and shot evolved. To really wrap your head around this era, imagine you're playing a strategy game, right? But the other player gets to make 3 moves for every single one of yours. That was the Swedish army. They completely ditched those massive, rigid infantry blocks that everyone else was using. Instead, they used small, highly flexible units of musketeers, backing them up with light artillery. It was an absolute revolution in warfare. It meant they could rapidly pivot, move, and strike before Wallenstein's dense, traditional imperial formations could even blink. But hey, Wallenstein was certainly no fool. He knew perfectly well he couldn't match Swedish mobility out in the open. So what does he do? He builds a trap. By November 1632, he locks down a formidable defensive position near the town of Lützen. His plan was actually to winter his troops and strictly avoid a pitched battle altogether. Utilizing the local terrain brilliantly, you might see parallels here to the defenders at the Battle of Kyiv. Wallenstein dug his musketeers directly into the roadside ditches. By doing that, he created this lethal entrenched kill zone specifically designed to just utterly shred any advancing Swedish infantry. Which brings us to section 4, the fog of Lützen, November 16th, 1632. Let's walk through how this utter chaos actually unfolded. Right in the morning, this thick, blinding fog completely blankets the battlefield, causing massive disorientation across both armies. By midday, a horrific, grinding melee erupts right inside Wallenstein's kill zones. Fast forward to the afternoon, and the usually flexible Swedish center actually starts buckling under the sheer, crushing weight of imperial counterattacks. Realizing his guys are in serious trouble, Gustavus Adolphus personally takes command, launching a titanic, desperate cavalry charge to hold the line together. And it's right here, right in the middle of this blinding fog and absolute chaos, that history completely pivots. The aggressive line of the North, who was leading right from the front as he always did, ends up getting separated from his men. Lost in the total confusion of the melee, the king is cut down. Just like that, the legendary Swedish commander was dead on the field. Now, think about this for a second. In almost any other army in history, the sudden death of your monarch right on the battlefield, that would trigger an immediate, catastrophic rout. Everybody would just run. But not the Swedes. The news of Gustavus falling didn't break them. It actually inspired a wild, visceral fury for vengeance. The Swedish infantry literally erupted. They threw themselves into the imperial lines with a ferocity that echoed Roman troops after the death of Manaz. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were out for absolute retribution. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the tragic harvest. Let's tally the cost of Lützen. This entire engagement is basically the ultimate historical lesson in Pyrrhic victories. Yes, fueled by that wild fury, the Swedes technically held the field at the end of the day. But the human cost? It was absolute, a truly tragic harvest. And if we zoom out to the macro view of the war, the loss of the Lion of the North effectively killed off any remaining dreams of a unified Protestant empire in Central Europe. Sweden won the battlefield, sure, but they fundamentally lost their grand ambition. So, what about our calculated genius, Wallenstein? Well, he actually managed to retreat in pretty good order, saving a big chunk of his army. But his failure to secure a total decisive victory against the Swedes, that was the beginning of the end for him. Remember that political paranoia we talked about earlier? Because he couldn't deliver the killing blow, Wallenstein lost the ultimate confidence of his Catholic emperor. And let me tell you, in the brutal, cutthroat world of 17th century politics, the minute a general loses his sovereign's trust, the die is totally cast. That single loss of faith directly paved the way to his eventual assassination by his own side. So both of our titans fell, didn't they? One gets cut down in the literal fog of battle, and the other is consumed by the shadows of political paranoia. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. Once the die is cast, can a military movement ever truly survive the loss of its visionary architect? The Battle of Lützen is proof that while tactics and armies can constantly evolve, the irreplaceable spark of individual genius might just be the most fragile weapon of all. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you in the next one.